Paternity fraud is when a man is incorrectly identified as the biological father of a child. If you're not married and you have doubts that you're the father, make sure you do this. Do not sign the voluntary declaration of paternity. Make sure you're not on the birth certificate. If the mother files and serves a petition, request a DNA test. If you are married and you have doubts, you have 2 years from the birth of the baby to challenge paternity. After that, you'll be deemed the legal father of the child, even if DNA tests reveal later that you're not the biological father.
Welcome to The Wall. In today's video, we will look at 2 interesting paternity fraud stories. A man who had even become a grandfather finds out that none of his children are his own. A woman with an ancestry DNA test discovers that her great-grandmother cheated on her great-grandfather with a paternity fraud. We want to invite you to smash that like button and help us reach 100,000 subscribers before the end of the year to get our first plaque. That's the only support we ask from you, man. Add your grain of sand to the movement. Leave us your experience in the comments for any man who might need it. And without further introduction, let's get started.
I have been married for 51 years. Got 2 sons. Needed to take a test. Found out something interesting. They ain't my kids. They're somebody else's. I do wish I knew who the real fathers were. And they ain't the same. She was bopping a couple of different guys. I stayed with her for the sake of the children. I've been in court thousands of times in paternity suits. And 4 out of 5 times, guy says he ain't the daddy, he's right. I'll go home, start drafting up some divorce papers. I'll need to go get your own paternity test.
And here we go again. But this time it's coming from a judge that's been married for over half a century. He needed his sons to get tested for a kidney transplant. And in doing so, he discovered that both of his sons do not belong to him. Both of them. Now, look at the age of this man. He said he's going to go home and draw up divorce papers. Imagine getting divorced at that age because you find out the children that you've loved for 40 plus years are not yours. And this man also has grandchildren and great-grandchildren. None of them share his DNA. So imagine becoming 70 plus years old and you think you have a whole legacy built of all these people that are now here on earth because of your DNA. But it's not. And he even alluded to the fact that both children might have also come from different men. Imagine that. In his video, he also stated that he presided over thousands of paternity cases, and that in 4 out of 5 of those cases, that the father was not the biological father. 4 out of 5. We need more laws protecting men from this maneuver. This is fraud and should be taken quite seriously. Much like the cuckoo bird that lays an egg in another bird's nest in order to dupe the host into raising the hatchling as their own. Far too many women are doing the same to men. I'm going to say it again. Get your kids swapped, guys. As this judge said in the longer version of his video, you cannot go by looks. If this judge had found out earlier, he could have left her, remarried, had his own children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and built an authentic legacy. I doubt for a moment this judge would have ever thought he would be on this side of the fence. Duplicitous behavior is rampant, and you don't want to become the victim of that.
Damn! You can deceive a man. You can take everything from him in a divorce. You can falsely accuse him of abuse. You can steal his money. You can date a friend. And from all that, a man can recover. But telling a man that a child is his, making him raise another man's seed thinking it's his own, then finding out after years of raising that child that it isn't his, that's a wound that never stops hurting. That destroys a man physically and mentally. This judge is destroyed. 51 years living with a man, and you couldn't give him a single child. The 2 children of that man, who has an entire family built, where only that woman used him. This video is longer because over the years he saw that those children didn't resemble him in any way. They were losers compared to what he wanted them to be because DNA doesn't lie. There's a saying that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree because none of the children inherited his drive to succeed. His hobbies, nothing. He noticed they didn't resemble his lineage. But he trusted, sure with the thought every man has, she loves me, she would never do something like that to me. For things like this, I say, do the test. Tell a woman before marrying her that you will do it with her permission or without it, but the DNA test will be done. Set a precedent because at least this way she will be afraid to cheat on you, because you made your conditions clear. She knows it wouldn't work on you. Stop thinking she wouldn't do that to me because every man it happened to thought the same thing.
I think I discovered a scandal in my family's DNA. Using Ancestry DNA, I did my mom and me and my grandmother. And my grandmother passed away 3 years ago, but I had done this DNA test on her 7 years ago. And I was able to match up on the Ancestry website, like most people in our family. But then there was a whole bunch of people that just didn't match up anywhere. And according to Ancestry, they all came through my grandmother somehow. And so I started looking at the matches that were like really close to her. And one of them that I found, it showed that it should have been a niece of hers, but she doesn't have any siblings. So there was either an error in the test or something weird's going on. So I started looking at who these people were and looking at their family trees and their census records and everything. And I was seeing that they lived relatively close to where my family's from. So I started narrowing in on the time frame of the 1930s and found that not only did they live in the same city, but they actually lived on the same block as my grandmother.
A great-grandmother who cheats. Nothing new under the sun. Do you know why the paternity fraud rate is at 32% today? Because 1 in 3 men who take the test comes out negative. 1 in 3. That means there must be almost 10 million men in this country raising children that aren't theirs. So I wonder, why don't men do DNA tests? Some don't want to know the truth. They prefer to raise Chad's seed. Others don't want to lose their woman. Others because the woman threatens them and acts offended. Something I don't understand because if you know the child is yours, why shouldn't the man know too? Because the only sure thing when a child is born is who the mother is, nothing else. But let's continue with the story. It's quite good.
So my DNA, my mom's DNA, and my grandmother's DNA clearly matches the descendants of this family that lived next to my grandmother when she was born in 1930. When she was born, she was an only child, and her mother was 41 and her father was 46. They had been married for over 20 years and had not had a child. And now all of a sudden, this miracle baby in their early 40s. But also, we're DNA related to the neighbors who my great-grandmother supposedly worked for, nannied for, or something like that. Was this a situation where the neighbor forced himself on my great-grandmother? Were they having some kind of consensual affair when she got pregnant? Did my great-grandfather realize any of this was going on? Was he surprised that his wife all of a sudden got married after she started spending more time with the neighbor? Some of this stuff we're never going to be able to know, but I did find out a couple of other details that make a plot twist even more interesting.
Oh my God!
I like to see how women twist the story to always make the woman the victim. The neighbor forced my great-grandmother into a relationship because it couldn't be that your great-grandmother, desperate not to have a child with her husband, went looking for her boss's seed, since she worked taking care of his children, seeing that they were healthy children, and that it was good quality seed, what better than to go for it? But of course, brothers, she was forced. In the past, this was more common than ever, which is why these ancestry tests have uncovered things and destroyed marriages. Women have been doing this for many years. Many times, they don't even know who they got pregnant by because they go out with so many men that they don't realize. Others get pregnant on their girls' nights out and then pin it on their boyfriend or husband. That's why if you've been trying with a woman for more than 5 to 7 years and nothing ever happens, go to the doctor first and see how you are. If everything is fine and the woman gets pregnant, do your test as usual. But if there's a problem and the woman gets pregnant afterward, you understand what's happening, right? Let's look at the other part.
So I found these DNA matches on Ancestry that pretty much proved to me that my grandmother's neighbor was actually her biological father and not the father listed on her birth certificate and who she always thought was her father. So what happened to the biological father? That's where things get even more strange. Within a year of my grandmother being born, he up and leaves his entire family in Pittsburgh. Doesn't just leave his wife and his children, moves from Pittsburgh to Florida and changes his name and eventually dies in Florida with his name changed. Now, I was able to confirm all of this not only through records that I found on Ancestry, but I reached out to somebody else who's around my grandmother's age, who has also done a lot of genealogy in our family, and he helped me put together the pieces and said that he agrees that this is what happened. However, I've told all my family and other members of his family, and no one wants to think that it's true. What do you think?
Oh, God, please, no! No! No!
I think it's true. The husband of that woman knew, because after 20 years of marriage without having children, he saw this girl and they said she was his. He knew she wasn't his, but he couldn't have children. That's why he moved. That's why he changed his name so he wouldn't be found. And there are men like that, beta providers who are willing to raise Chad's seed. Even if they are deceived, they forgive and move on because abandoning your family was frowned upon back then. There were no DNA tests to show if the child was yours or not. You were trapped, especially after being married for so many years. I would like to read in the comments what you would have done.
I think it's funny how a lot of women will say that men lie and men are pieces of shit, but why is it that 26.9% of all women have lied about paternity? Meaning they've actually pinned a child on a father that isn't theirs. And most of them have admitted doing this because they pick the more suitable father out of the men that they've been cheating with. Additionally, another study was done in the UK that 1 in 10 women don't know who the biological father is and they just take a guess. These men actually grow bonds with their children and raise them and fall in love with them, and then they ultimately find out that the child is not theirs. How sick do you have to be to do that to a man, but also to do that to your own child? It's absolutely diabolical. And the worst part about it is there's little to no consequences to the women that do this. In fact, they might get a slap on the wrist or have to pay a fine, and that's only if the father wants to sue, and most of the men don't go after her or don't do anything because they don't have the financial means to fight it in court. I mean, do what you will with this information. Okay, bye.
Totally. If the woman doesn't care at all about hurting you, why should it hurt you to want to confirm that the child is yours? If your child is born, don't sign that birth certificate without your DNA test, because everyone will say the child looks like you or a relative. It's better if they actually resemble you in blood. That's the true resemblance. Men, set a precedent. Before marrying or being with a woman to have children, make it clear that you will do a DNA test on all your children, with or without her approval. That way, she won't be able to deceive you easily because she knows it won't work with you. Don't care if she comes with the "you don't trust me" blackmail. This isn't a matter of trust. It's a matter of protecting my interests and my future. No one puts their future in someone else's hands. Do you know what is spent on a child? It's not just 18 years of child support. It's also expenses and gifts, everything they ask for. Sometimes university tuition, leaving an inheritance, helping them through all their life processes, plus all the emotional investment. So that one day they tell you that you did all that for another man's seed? Look at the judge. He sees this every day. Look how the one who lives seeing these cases thought it would never happen to him. It did. 51 years with grandchildren. That's criminal, and nothing happens to the mother. Don't fall into this trap. DNA test. We've reached the end of the video, but before we go, the questions are for you. Do you know someone who was a victim of paternity fraud? What happened after they found out? What advice do you have for men who want to have children nowadays with modern women? If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Your support means the world to us and motivates us to create more content. Stay tuned for the next exciting video from the wall.